Go change the world. That phrase can become so overwhelming and so daunting. Those 4 simple words begin to beg this question of, well, gosh, how would I even do that? What would it even look like to change the world around me? How would I begin to take on such a difficult and overwhelming task? A few years back, that phrase became a regular part of my vocabulary. I feel like I was often using that phrase to push and to challenge myself. I'd find myself ending conversations with friends or even emails with that simple phrase of, let's go change the world for Jesus. See, I wanted to, and I still want to, change the world for God. I want people to hear and to see His love and to be radically changed by that forever. But I get so caught up in this big picture idea that I'd often forget, well, practically, what does this even look like? How do I even begin to do this and live this day in and day out? Inside all of us, I think it's the same desire, the same longing for change. We want to change the environment around us. We want to influence and change the culture we live in, to change the people we interact with day in and day out. But that same question rises to the surface of, well, how do I even do this? How do I even change the people and the things in my life? When I think of this big idea of changing the world, this image of a wildfire comes to mind. If you think of a wildfire, it is so big and so great that there's literally nothing in its path that it won't affect. That as long as there's enough trees and grass and open space in front of this fire, it will literally keep going and going and going, and growing bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. And everything that it comes in contact with will be changed, will be influenced, will be affected in some way or another. It's so easy to get caught up in the massive, overwhelming size of the flames, though, that we sometimes forget how this fire even starts in the first place. That without a tiny little spark, a tiny little flame, there would be no forest fire. But once this little spark is ignited and this flame begins to grow, that's when this forest fire becomes unstoppable. That's when the magnitude and the greatness of this fire consumes and changes everything in its path. Christianity, I think, is the same way. That following Jesus, that changing the world for Jesus becomes like this forest fire. Sometimes we get so caught up in this big picture idea of these flames and the flames of God's love influencing and changing and impacting people that we forget that this fire has to start with a single flame. And that flame is us. Change can't happen without commitment. If you're not committed to something, change will never take place. The problem is, though, we live in a society that is so non-committal. And I'm right up there with them. I am so quick to not commit to things. If people will ask me if I want to hang out or do something, my first response is always, maybe. Right? I'll say something like, well, let me check my schedule first. Let me make sure I don't have anything else going on during that time. And let's be real, right? There's never anything in my schedule keeping me up from hanging out with this person. But I never want to fully commit. I want to leave myself with a way out. I wonder if our faith, if our belief in Jesus is the same way. If we're just as non-committal when it comes to following God. I'm so quick to say, God, let's go. God, I want to follow you. I want to serve you. I want to change the world for you, Jesus. But then when things get tough, when things get hard, I'm the quickest to run and to turn my back on that. To forget my commitment. In the book of Matthew, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, were coming up to Jesus and they asked Jesus this question. Jesus, what is the greatest commandment there is? And Jesus responds to them with this. He says, the greatest commandment is this, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. It's as if Jesus was saying, the greatest commandment, the greatest thing you can do is to be fully committed to God, to love God with everything that you have, To be committed not just with your heart, the things you believe, things that you feel, but with your mind too. The things you think about, with your strength, the things and the actions you do and perform. To be committed to God with your soul. At the core of the core of the core of who we are, we'd be committed to knowing and loving God. That's the greatest commandment. A lot of you guys have probably already made that commitment to follow Jesus. For some of you guys, maybe you haven't, and maybe that step number one is to say, God, I want to be fully committed to you. But for those of you who have committed to following Jesus, maybe it's time to fully commit. To go all in, to be fully invested with every part of who we are. Guys, we can never change the world for Jesus unless we're fully committed to Jesus. We have to let God start that spark and that flame inside of us. To say, God, I am fully committed. I'm all in for you, Jesus. And once that flame starts, when that spark is lit, there's no stopping what God can do through us. There's no stopping the world change that God can do. We can change the world. We can change our nation. Change your schools, change your families, change your friends' lives forever. But it starts with that spark. Guys, let's go. Let's do it. Let's be all in. Let's be fully committed. A forest fire can't start without a spark. Change can't start without commitment. Let's be committed to God, and let's go change the world for Jesus.